Yo history buffs and midnight snack fiends, grab a seat. We're gate-crashing the breakfast table of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ran Rome, curb-stomped Germanic tribes, and scribbled Stoic gems that still haunt self-help books. Before we raid his imperial fridge, smash that like button. If you're digging this, subscribe. If you're not scarfing cold pizza at 2 a.m. like a sketchy Roman senator, and drop a comment with your city and the time. I want to know who's watching this while battling a soggy sandwich. Set the scene, ancient Rome candles flickering like they're in a moody TikTok. Let's dive into Marcus's morning munchies. Picture young Marcus, not yet the brooding beard of your philosophy memes, but a lanky kid in his Spania eyeballing a breakfast that could make a mule weep. Star of the show pulls Rome's gloomiest porridge, a hot, salty emmer wheat sludge so gritty it could sandblast a statue. Good day. They'd slosh in sheep's milk, which sounds posh, but tasted like a goat's bad mood. Festival vibes. Maybe a dried grape so withered it looked like it dodged Vesuvius. Beside this bowl of woe sat Panis Quadratus, a spelt brick posing as bread dense enough to sink a trireme or stun a gladiator. This loaf didn't crumb it, crumbled your spirit. Then olives, because nothing screams kid's meal like briny bitter orbs that taste like they've been sulking in brine since Hannibal's elephants. If you were lucky, aka had imperial genes and a pulse, you might snag a wedge of goat cheese so rank it could clear a forum. To wash it down, Mulsum a honey wine mix so watered down it was basically Roman Capri Sun. Straight wine nope that was for barbarians and poets who'd already pawned their togas. This wasn't food, it was a stoic gauntlet for your gums. Why this sad spread? Blame Antoninus, pious Marcus's adoptive dad who raised him like he was auditioning for Gladiator: The Hunger Games. No syrupy cakes, no proto-smoothies, just pure soul-crushing discipline. This was breakfast as a moral cage match prepping Marcus to one day choke down soggy camp grub in Germania without tweeting a complaint. Calories check, flavor only if noble pain counts as seasoning. Cut to teenage Marcus trying to sneak an extra fig at lunch when who's giving him the stink-eye Epictetus, the stoic sage and ex-slave who could make a lentil lecture sound like a Netflix special. Reach for another olive, and he's like lust for taste. That's how empires fall. Suddenly, your bread's a philosophy pop quiz. Epictetus wasn't just a tutor, he was the original food cop preaching that every bite forged your soul. Lentils, cheap virtuous, and tasting like a sandal's diary, honey-dipped Dormus one nibble, and you're one silk robe away from being Caligula. Too little food, you're a weakling. Too much, and you're hosting orgies by dusk. This wasn't just dietary tough love, it was philosophy with a side of beans. While other teens were doodling on wax tablets, Marcus was debating if Cato the Elder would have yeeted his figs for being too decadent. Epictetus's rule, eat to survive, not to smile. This stuck with Marcus even when he was emperor facing Germanic feasts that could tempt a Vestal virgin. Picture it boar glazed in honey so sticky it could trap a legion ale potent enough to wrestle Mars. And Marcus is just gnawing bread, sipping water, maybe tossing in an olive if he's feeling like a rock star. Why? Because indulgence was the fast track to losing your imperial mojo. So next time you're demolishing a breakfast burrito, tip your hat to Marcus Aurelius, who tamed his taste buds before he tamed half the world. His morning mush wasn't just food, it was the OG Stoic protein shake. Comment. Below what's your breakfast vibe and would Epictetus approve or chuck it in the Tiber? Look, lunch with Epictetus wasn't a barrel of laughs unless your idea of fun is being guilt-tripped by a lentil. But it shaped Marcus Aurelius into the guy who could conquer both barbarian hordes and his own cravings. In imperial Rome, saying nah to a second helping of Dormes was the ultimate power move. If you've ever packed a lunch with grim determination, a single stale roll, and the willpower of a gladiator, you're basically legion cook material. The Roman army's midday meal wasn't about tickling your taste buds. It was about not passing out mid-battle cry in some soggy German forest. Marcus's campaign lunches, pure, no-frills austerity. Picture hardtack bread baked so hard it could double as a catapult projectile. This wasn't bread you ate. It was bread you negotiated with, preferably with a sword and a therapist. Alongside this jawbreaker were a few rugged road snacks aged cheese that could survive a march, but smelled like it was ready to throw hands and onions the Roman legion's MVP. Onions were thought to boost strength courage and breath so lethal it could fend off a Visigoth at 10 paces. If the supply wagons didn't get ambushed by Germanic tribes, you might score a pouch of dried dates or figs, Rome's version of energy bars with a texture like a toga left out in the rain. Protein. Maybe some salted pork or beef or venison if you'd just rolled a tribe with a decent deer stash. This meat didn't melt in your mouth, it dared you to keep chewing, to drink, if the gods were feeling generous, Pascha, a sour wine-water mix that tasted like a bad life choice but kept you hydrated. Otherwise, it was lukewarm flask water marinated in the essence of horse and existential dread, refreshing like a slap from reality. Here's the kicker: Marcus chowed down on the same grim rations as his soldiers. No whining for saffron-dusted peacock or grapes peeled by quivering captives. He'd squat in the mud rip into that granite bread and chew like he was trying to intimidate the empire into submission with his molars alone. So don't imagine the Roman lunchbox as some gourmet picnic. Picture a leather pouch stuffed with calories that stared you down and said, "You want to live? Prove it." Functional, brutal, and philosophical, just like Marcus himself. This wasn't just food. It was Marcus learning that real strength isn't in what you shove in your face, but in what you can skip. Every bite was a stoic boot camp, every onion a meditation on wanting less. In a Roman world where excess was practically a job requirement, the ultimate flex was needing nothing. That's not just lunch. That's wisdom with a side of grit. In the twilight of the medieval world, when Iberia's brainiest folks still huddled under stone arches, arguing about stars and souls, like it was the ultimate pub quiz, Lucretia Scientia was the rock star of Cordoba. Born around 1160 CE in this buzzing hub of ideas she wasn't supposed to be. The main act, Christian Iberia's rulebook, screamed, "Ladies, stay in the kitchen." But Lucretia, she was out here slaying philosophy and math like a medieval Hermione Granger. Her dad, Gaius Mathematicus, was a big-shot scholar at the Academia Cordubensis, a nerd paradise still vibing off. The fading glory of Al-Andalus's epic libraries. While most dads taught their boys Latin and horse riding, Gaius was like Lucretia, let's crank up the geometry. He schooled her in arithmetic, astronomy, and Aristotle's brainbenders. She didn't just soak it up, she grilled those theories like they owed her money, then started teaching them herself. By adulthood, Lucretia had lapped her dad in the smarts department, and was basically Cordoba's intellectual influencer. Her lectures pulled crowds from all over Christian Iberia, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and the odd skeptic who just showed up for the free shade. Rocking her scholar's cloak like a superhero cape, she held court in Cordoba's courtyards, dropping celestial motion and number theory with such flair that folks swore she was half angel, half algorithm. This wasn't some dusty academic hiding in a scroll-stuffed closet. Lucretia strutted through medieval Iberia's boys' club, dishing out advice to city bigwigs and royal governors like she was their life coach. She was the last spark of a scholarly golden age flickering as religious dogma and political chaos started gate-crashing the party. Cordoba wasn't just a city of dusty tomes anymore. It was a religious tug-of-war with Christianity, flexing Islamic scholarship fading, and politics spicier than any math proof. Lucretia's fame. Her who needs a husband vibe and her rep as the poster girl for logic over faith started ruffling feathers. Some folks weren't fans of her brainy swagger, but early on she was untouchable, a dazzling relic of a world that was slipping away shining brighter than the men who tried to dim her. In an era when women were expected to pop out kids and steer clear, Of lecture halls, Lucretia pulled the ultimate plot twist: she picked books over babies. And Cordoba. They kinda rolled with it. Her brain was so sharp arguing with her was like bringing a spoon to a sword fight. She didn't sneak into scholarly circles, she was handed the VIP pass. Her wizardry in math and astronomy made her the queen of Aristotelian scholarship, mixing Aristotle's big ideas with medieval mysticism like a philosophical smoothie. Think soul ascents, divine vibes, and material spiritual bridges, all served with a side of geometric sass. Her lectures weren't just nerdy TED Talks. Lucretia was a magnet pulling students from every corner of Christian Iberia. Picture upper-class Christian dudes who'd normally clutch their pearls at a woman talking sitting cross-legged learning logic from the lady their society would have shushed. She taught in public, no secret clubhouse needed riding through Cordoba, in her scholar's robes owning forums and amphitheaters like a medieval rock star. It wasn't just her brain that hooked them, it was her vibe. Lucretia was hardcore ascetic, saying no thanks to gold and gossip. She stayed single, probably to keep her schedule clear for galaxy-sized thoughts. One story, possibly spiced up but too good to skip, says a lovesick student tried to woo her, and Lucretia shut it down by waving a bloody cloth and snapping, "This is what you're into, kid, not wisdom." Mic drop, but she wasn't all ice. Her students worshipped her not just as a prof, but as a moral GPS. Some became bishops, judges, even governors. Marcus of Salamanca. Her biggest fanboy turned bishop, but kept sending her letters that were half fanfic, half philosophy, and half therapy session math wasn't his thing. Lucretia wasn't just a scholar, she was Cordoba's soul. All science, philosophy, and tolerance glowing in a world getting grumpier by the minute. By her prime, the Academia Cordubensis, once Iberia's nerd HQ, was a ghost of its former self, battered by wars, neglect, and religious side-eyes. What was left? Scattered annexes, scrolls stashed in private stashes, and a few die-hard scholars chasing the dream of knowing everything. Among Cordoba's brainiacs, Lucretia Scientia was the supernova. She wasn't officially running the show at the crumbling Academia Cordubensis, but everyone knew she was the real MVP keeping its legacy alive. She wasn't just dusting off old math books, she was editing Euclid like a medieval copy editor, and sprucing up Ptolemy's star charts. Some nerds even whisper she tinkered with the astrolabe's design and souped up tools for stargazing. Yep. Lucretia wasn't just daydreaming about constellations, she was building the medieval equivalent of a telescope. Her biggest flex, a commentary on Ptolemy's Almagest, a beast of a book packed with mathy models explaining why planets zigzagged like they were dodging taxes. Most folks couldn't even say Almagest without tripping over their togas, but Lucretia's edits made it user-friendly for future brainiacs. Her tweaks became the gold standard in later translations, even after the Christian world forgot her name faster than a bad tavern song. But Lucretia wasn't gatekeeping knowledge, she was practically yeeting it at anyone who'd listen. Her classroom, wherever she parked her mule, diagramming geometric proofs or dismantling Aristotle's motion theories, she saw math and philosophy as one big cosmic group hug mind, and stars all vibing together. That unity made her a legend, but also a target. Cordoba was getting a makeover, and not the fun kind. Christian bishops were flexing monasteries, were flipping to Team Dogma, and secular learning was starting to look like a party crasher. Lucretia, with her rational swagger, went from teacher to troublemaker. A woman preaching astronomy over psalms, questioning instead of nodding and dodging nunneries. In a city leaning hard into faith, she was the last spark of the old reason first world. And sparks tend to draw pitchforks. By the early 1200s, Cordoba wasn't the chill nerd haven it used to be. It was a pressure cooker of religious beef, political knife fights, and street brawls. Lucretia, whether she meant to or not, had leveled up from philosopher to symbol. And symbols. They're mob magnets. On one side, you had the last intellectuals and secular bigwigs clutching their scrolls like life rafts. On the other, a tidal wave of hardcore Christianity, no longer the underdog, but a political bulldozer. In the middle, royal admins like Governor Quintus, trying to keep the peace with all the finesse of a guy juggling flaming torches in a windstorm. Enter Bishop Severus Corduba's new head honcho, who rolled in around 1205 CE with zero chill. Ambitious, slick, and ready to make the church the city's top dog, he locked horns with Quintus, a Christian, but a laid-back one who didn't mind Corduba's mix-and-match vibe. The two were like oil and water, and Lucretia. She was the spark in the middle, advising Quintus while staying stubbornly neutral. No converting, no picking teams, no vanishing into a convent. In a world where neutrality was basically treason, that was a bold move. The Christian crowd, especially the fire and brimstone types, started muttering that Lucretia was the puppet master behind Quintus and Severus's feud. Rumors flew. She was casting spells, brewing pagan potions, holding Cordoba back from its holy glow-up. Total nonsense, but when a city's high on zeal and low on chill nonsense spreads like wildfire. Meanwhile, the Zelati, originally just church folks tending the sick, had morphed into Severus's street muscle, flexing for the cross. Lucretia, unbothered, kept riding her mule through town, brilliant secular and backed by royal clout, acting like she didn't have a bullseye on her cloak. But in Corduba's new vibe, nobody dodged the crossfire forever. Severus didn't climb to bishop status to play nice. Taking the throne in 1205, he inherited a church itching to dominate, and he wasn't here to just lead prayers. This guy slung theology like a warhammer and politics like a stiletto. Corduba, split by brainy dreams and holy crusades, was his perfect playground. His game plan: squash heresy and make the church the boss of everything. He shut down Islamic schools, kicked out Jewish scholars, and turned his sermons into pep rallies for the faithful. The Zelati, now less soup kitchen and more holy enforcers, became his street crew, ready to back up his divine TED Talks with some divine knuckle sandwiches. Governor Quintus, bless his Christian heart, was all about keeping Corduba's live and let live vibe, but Bishop Severus's power grabs were like a bull in a scroll shop. Their bromance tanked faster than a chariot with a busted wheel. Quintus tried sweet talking, then containment, but got a mob throwing rocks at his head instead. When one zealot, Brother Fervidus, got nabbed and executed for the stunt, Severus spun him into a martyr like a medieval PR wizard. The beef was now a full-on blood feud. Stuck in this political cage match was Lucretia, Quintus's brainy BFF and Severus's followers' favorite villain. She wasn't out here plotting coups, but her sheer intellect was a middle finger to the idea that only priests had the keys to wisdom. A woman, a secular stargazer and Quintus's go-to advisor, in a city where theology and power were basically married. Her "I'm just here for the math" stance was riskier than juggling torches in a hay barn. Severus's silence on the anti-Lucretia gossip was louder than a cathedral bell. In Corduba, when folks start muttering about witches, it's only a heartbeat before someone's fetching the kindling. By 1210 CE, Corduba was a city where truth was as welcome as a tax collector. Lucretia, once Iberia's academic superstar, was being repainted as the bad guy in a gothic soap opera. Whispers spread like cheap wine. She was a sorceress, hexing Quintus, scheming to dunk on the church. Zero evidence, but who needs facts when you've got vibes? Her crime being too visible. Riding through town, teaching in public, advising big shots, her confidence, especially as a woman, was like catnip to Cordoba's hardline holy rollers. To them, she was the poster girl for everything wrong with the old brainy days, female, philosophical, and stubbornly not baptized. Rumors got wild. She was summoning demons, brewing potions, using her astrolabes to mind control men. In reality, those were just nerdy tools for star watching. But to folks allergic to science, a protractor might as well be a pentagram. One bonkers tale even blamed her for Quintus and Severus's beef, with logic straight out of a bad tavern. Bet Lucretia advises Quintus fights Severus, so Lucretia's the mastermind. A+ for creativity, F for facts. The streets were a powder keg. It wasn't if Lucretia would get got, but when and how messy. The Zelati, once humble caregivers, had morphed into holy hitmen itching for a crusade. Corduba's Christian majority, already sold on Lucretia as a pagan witch, just needed a nudge to go feral. Severus never gave that nudge outright, he was too slick for that. But his shrug at the rumors, his refusal to defend a woman he knew was just a nerd with a mule, was as good as a green light. Silence, it turns out, is just a sneakier way to say go for it. The trap around Lucretia tightened, not with shackles, but with gossip and side-eyes, the kind of cage you don't spot until it's game over. It went down in spring 1212 CE. Lucretia, now in her early 50s, was still riding her mule through Cordoba, still schooling her students, still existing, like a one-woman suck-it to fanaticism. She had to know the vibes were off, glares, sharper whispers, nastier the air, thick with uh-oh. But she kept on a walking middle finger to the mob. Then they pounced. No trial, no paperwork, just a mob hopped up on righteous rage led by the Zeloti and a church reader named Brother Torquatus, who probably thought he was auditioning for Sainthood the action movie. They ambushed her near the old forum, yanked her off her mule, and stripped her scholar's robes like they were tearing down a pagan statue. Dragged into a church irony alert, they turned a holy space into a horror show. Chronicler Benedictus Scholasticus says they pelted her with stones and roof tiles, flaying her alive. Others claim they ripped her apart like a human piñata. Either way, they torched what was left, as if burning her bones would yeet her legacy into oblivion. It wasn't a legal execution. It was a tantrum with rocks. Corduba didn't just lose a scholar, it lost its last public philosopher, its last shred of the open-minded mojo that once made it shine. Quintus couldn't do squat. Severus mumbled some thoughts and prayers, but dodged blame like a pro. No arrests, no investigation, just silence, then amnesia. Lucretia's death wasn't just a murder, it was a cultural guillotine. Corduba's days as Iberia's nerd capital were done, replaced by a hard turn into dogma. Her broken body was the final nail in the coffin of a centuries-long intellectual party. A scholar died, and a whole world went with her. Tucked under a sleepy slice of the Pyrenees, just 40 clicks from Toulouse's ancient hustle, lies a secret so wild it sounds like medieval fan fiction. No medieval GPS pinged it, no monk's diary name dropped it, no Roman ruins, no Gothic spires, just a mind-boggling underground maze beneath the hamlet of Vallis Secretum, dubbed the Sanctuaries of Wisdom. For nearly 3 decades, nobody outside a quirky mystical crew had a clue it existed. This ain't some damp cave with a couple of etched crosses. We're talking 6 sprawling levels linked by twirling tunnels, stone stairs, and vaulted halls that could make a monastery jealous. Picture sacred art, stone-carved manuscripts, cosmic doodles, and golden altars, all hand-chiseled like a subterranean Pinterest board gone rogue. It's like someone decided to yeet Mont Saint-Michel underground, then tossed in Celtic swirls, Islamic tile vibes, Jewish mystical glyphs, and star charts for extra flair. Who pulled this off? Not the church, not some ancient order with a fancy crest. Nope. It was a low-key spiritual squad called Terra Mystica, named after the old-school idea that some patches of dirt are basically cosmic Wi-Fi hotspots. Founded in 1187, these dreamers wanted a utopia of harmony, self-reliance, and spiritual glow-ups. The sanctuaries were their bat signal to the universe, a hidden HQ meant to sync human souls with the starry skies. Construction kicked off in 1203, led by Giovanni Vicinarius, a former merchant who traded silk for spiritual side quests. With 0 permits, no blueprints, and just hand tools, Giovanni and his posse started digging under a bland stone house. They worked ninja style at night, repurposing the dirt to sculpt the hillside, and kept their lips zipped. It was spiritual rebellion building in secret what they knew the world wasn't ready for. And they pulled it off for 28 years. Nobody clocked that behind a snooze-fest countryside monastery. A gang of artists, masons, and believers was crafting an underground masterpiece. That is, until a salty ex-member snitched to the church in the 1230s. The Inquisition, expecting a sketchy prayer circle, rolled up and found a subterranean stunner that left them gobsmacked. The sanctuaries of wisdom didn't just pop up like a medieval Airbnb. They sprang from the wild imagination of Giovanni Benedetti, later nicknamed Aquila the Eagle, because apparently Fancy Pants was taken. Back in the late 1100s, Giovanni was just a silk merchant hustling in southern France's buzzing markets. But off the clock, he was deep in the woo-woo, geeking out over mysticism, sacred geometry, and what he called eternity's group chat. He swore he'd had visions since he was a kid, not fuzzy daydreams, but HD reruns of past lives serving divine wisdom, complete with cameos from Atlantis and Solomon's Temple. Giovanni didn't think these were fever dreams. He saw them as IKEA manuals from the cosmos. One vision screamed, build a sanctuary, not some metaphorical vibe, but a legit underground temple to wake up sleepy souls. So in 1187, he rounded up a ragtag crew in the Pyrenean foothills, all hyped for his dream of a self-sufficient, spiritually jacked community. They named themselves Terra Mystica, riffing on the idea that some lands are divine hotspots like spiritual 5G towers. Their goal wasn't to launch a new religion, but to craft a Christian-ish commune blending. Meditation, art farming, and mystical flair, Terra Mystica grew on the down low. Members ditched their old lives to live like medieval hippies in the French countryside. They meditated, chanted sacred bangers, and studied a mystical lingo they claimed let them DM the divine. They even cooked up their own calendar tied to star parties and claimed to chat with tree and rock spirits. To outsiders, it was quirky, at best, unhinged at worst. To the crew, it was the warm-up for a spiritual revolution. But the real tea. They'd already broken ground. Giovanni swore he'd seen the sanctuary in his visions and was destined to make it real. Armed with picks, hammers, buckets, and galaxy-sized Faith Terra Mystica started digging, no clue if they'd finish or if the church would bust them first. These Terra Mystica folks weren't just hacking at rocks. They were chiseling their wildest dreams into reality, crafting a secret hideout for a future they swore was coming, like medieval sci-fi nerds with a divine PowerPoint. From the outside, their Valles Secretum base was a snooze, a plain Pyrenean cottage that screamed nothing to see here, but under its floorboards behind a sneaky altar stone that slid like a medieval trapdoor yawned. A tunnel to Narnia, or the sanctuaries of wisdom. Starting in 1203, this ragtag crew pulled off an architectural heist that'd make Indiana Jones jealous. No cranes, no oxen, no fancy mason guilds, just a bunch of believers with chisels, hammers, and oil lamps that probably flickered like bad Wi-Fi. They burrowed into solid limestone, hauling out buckets of rubble like the world's most secretive landscaping crew working midnight shifts to dodge nosy neighbors. The leftover stone sneakily turned into terraces and garden walls, leaving the hillside looking like a Pinterest project, not a cover-up for an underground wonderland. This was no casual DIY. It was dangerous. No permits, no engineer's handbook, just vibes and prayers. One wrong whack, and they'd be pancake flat under the Pyrenees. But Terra Mystica was all and convinced their faith destiny and some angelic group chat would keep the roof up. Every chisel strike was a love letter to the divine, led by Giovanni aka Aquila, who swore he'd seen the whole setup in a vision down to the last golden altar. His doodles were their blueprint vaulted chambers for meditation, healing stargazing, and scroll copying, all linked by artsy passageways glowing with candlelight. That sacred geometry and mystical doodads drove the design, not boring stuff, like will this collapse? Even as more folks joined the dig, the secret held tighter than a monk's vow. Kids played hopscotch above clueless that their sandbox was a roof for a cosmic cathedral. For 28 years, no neighbor snitched, no rando wandered into the wrong basement, no bishop came knocking. By the 1230s, they'd carved a multi-level maze of decked-out halls, all without a single, "What's that noise from the village?" It was part grit, part lunacy, part art, and maybe a sprinkle of divine Wi-Fi. They weren't just building a sanctuary, they were mooning the medieval world, proving you could hide a sacred masterpiece under its nose. The sanctuaries of wisdom stayed Europe's best-kept secret for nearly 3 decades, like a medieval Area 51, but secrets like Bad Tavern Ale eventually spill. In 1231, a salty ex-Terra Mystica member, probably mad about dish duty, ratted them out to the church, whining about a massive illegal bunker under the Pyrenees. The Inquisition, rolling their eyes at what sounded like a drunk peasant's tale, expected a dodgy shed at best. Instead, they strolled into Valles Sacratum and nearly dropped their holy water. Through the secret passage, they stumbled into glittering chambers packed with stone-carved manuscripts, golden altars, and stained glass vibes made from colored crystals, all underground. Stone pillars, ribbed vaults, and symbols from every spiritual squad known to man left them slack-jawed. Some investigators thought they'd tripped into a lost ancient temple, not a fresh DIY by some hippie mystics. The scale and artistry were bonkers. A multi-level wonder hacked out of bedrock hiding under a cottage like Clark Kent's glasses. Word spread faster than gossip at a village, well sparking a mix of whoa and burn it. The church slammed the brakes, issuing a cease and desist. Or your all excommunicated edict freaked out by the lack of blessings and whispers of heresy. But then plot twist. Instead of pitchforks, people got curious. Tales of the Hall of Mirrors and Celestial Observatory had scholars and nobles buzzing like kids at a medieval Comic-Con. Who were these weirdos? How'd they pull this off? And why Terra Mystica, facing a divine pink slip, went full YOLO and opened the doors? They invited church bigwigs chroniclers, even grumpy theologians for a tour. And what they saw, not a heretic clubhouse, but a jaw-dropping spiritual art project. Trying to bury their vision, Terra Mystica had accidentally built a medieval marvel. Now the world was knocking, and they weren't just bringing pitchforks, they wanted selfies with the altars. Once the cosmic cat was out of the mystical bag, there was no stuffing it back in. With the church threatening to bulldoze their underground masterpiece, Terra Mystica rolled the dice and went full, come on in. Instead of playing hide-and-seek, they flung open the secret door and invited the medieval equivalent of Yelp reviewers. Chroniclers, theologians, architects, and even grumpy church officials to check out their subterranean shindig. Risky, sure. But it was a glow-up for the ages. What these VIPs found wasn't some sketchy heretic lair, but a vibe that screamed Chartres Cathedral meets a psychedelic fever dream. The Hall of Mirrors. A massive room with shiny metal walls, crystal ceilings and floors that turned candlelight into a divine disco ball. The Chamber of Earth. A chalice-shaped ode to the Virgin Mary and girl power, practically humming with sacred sass. Every sanctuary was dialed to 11, not just for looks but for feels, built to sync with ley lines' cosmic power chords. Terra Mystica swore crisscrossed the planet like divine Ethernet cables. The architecture was tuned to these lines, turning the whole place into a spiritual boombox. The church, now stuck with a PR nightmare, had a pickle to ponder. Sure, the sanctuaries were unblessed and technically illegal, but smashing them would be like torching a medieval Mona Lisa, just as half of Christendom was buying tickets. In a plot twist wilder than a troubadour's ballad, the church didn't nuke the place. Instead, they slapped on some theological red tape and let Terra Mystica keep their digs with strict no funny business rules. Architects poked the walls to make sure they wouldn't cave theologians' scribbled essays on the symbols, and artists just stood there, jaws on the floor. By the mid-1230s, the sanctuaries of wisdom had gone from burn it to book your pilgrimage. Now Terra Mystica leaned in, launching mystical retreats and guided tours like medieval influencers. Chroniclers sketched the halls, critics grumbled, but curiosity was the real MVP. The secrecy that once kept the sanctuaries safe, now it was their hype machine. Folks didn't just come for the art, they came to bask in a miracle that had no business existing. The mountain had zipped its lips for decades. Now it was shouting to the world, to the average Joe. The sanctuaries of wisdom might look like a medieval art project that chugged too much mead symbols, colors, and mystical bling everywhere, But to Terra Mystica, every inch was a cosmic Swiss Army knife built to crank up spiritual vibes, unlock human potential, and FaceTime the universe. Their big idea: the Earth's laced with ley lines like acupuncture meridians for the planet-linking power spots like Stonehenge Chartres, and now their Pyrenean hideout. They didn't just plop the sanctuaries anywhere they built at a ley line hotspot, turning the place into a divine Tesla charger. Each chamber had its own spiritual gig. The Chamber of Water was all about baptism and emotional spring cleaning. The Hall of Stars, the sanctuary's beating heart, supposedly a hotline to angelic interns and far-off galaxies. Not kidding, Terra Mystica genuinely thought the place was a cosmic walkie-talkie. They baked sound geometry and materials into the walls to juice up the vibes, iron spirals for zing quartz crystals for frequency flare, color symbols. Even the rocks were picked for their resonance with human souls and planetary playlists. Visitors swore they felt something energy waves, ghostly chants, or straight-up Zen trances. Placebo divine Wi-Fi. Even skeptical theologians admitted to getting the chills in some rooms. For Terra Mystica, it was just proof their sanctuary was alive, vibing with your prayers and emotions like a medieval mood ring. It wasn't just a bridge to heaven, but a launch pad to what humans could be. To them, the sanctuaries weren't some dusty relic, they were a beta test for a spiritual sequel to humanity. Sure, the underground bling was Terra Mystica's flashiest flex, but it was just one slice of their wild spiritual startup. Up top, Terra Mystica's village runs like a medieval Burning Man, with monk vibes, complete with its own rulebook economy schools, and a calendar that says, forget 1225, we're in year 38 of the Mystic Glow-Up. Yep, they kicked off their cosmic clock in 1187 when the gang got together. In their world, we're deep into the 40s and life's a quirky mix of mystical and mundane. The crew's split into squads: farmers, artists, scroll copiers, healers, and sanctuary diggers, each with a job to keep the spiritual train chugging. At its peak, over 200 folks from France and beyond called this Pyrenean hippie haven home. Joining ain't like signing up for a book club. Newbies face a novitiate gauntlet, ditching their worldly bling to live communally and pitch-in. Whether you're an illuminator doodling holy art or an herbalist brewing medieval Red Bull, everyone's got a role. Kids don't just learn Latin and Bible verses, they get crash courses in sacred geometry, ancient wisdom, and how to feel the vibes. There's even a scriptorium where you can major in mystical arts, spiritual sciences, or intro to cosmic chiropractic. It's like a monastery, but with extra sparkles and zero chill. At the heart of it all, the belief that God's in everything, and humans are here to level up as divine DIYers. That means hugging trees, probing consciousness, and using art like a spiritual espresso shot. To outsiders, it's half heresy. Half, did they eat the funny mushrooms? But there's no culty overlord, no rigid dogma beyond basic Christian vibes, and no obey. Or else. Leadership swaps like a medieval co-op, and you can bounce if it's not your jam. Some ex-members gripe about peer pressure or mystical burnout, but even they admit Terra Mystica's a one-of-a-kind medieval experiment. Less monastery, more let's live like spiritual superheroes. Stepping into the sanctuaries of wisdom is like diving into a cosmic coloring book. Every wall, ceiling, and floor is a chaotic Pinterest board of theology, math, and star-chasing swagger. To Terra Mystica, art isn't just pretty, it's sacred tech built to zap your soul awake, unlock divine déjà vu, and text God without a single amen. Their style, a wild mashup of Christian icons, Celtic squiggles, Islamic tile patterns, and star maps that scream intergalactic vibes only. One chamber's rocking the Tree of Life. Another's got spirals that look like DNA after a celestial bender. These aren't random doodles their soul Google Translate bypassing your brain to ping your spirit. Why, the cultural remix Terra Mystica says all sacred traditions are just different post-it notes from the same divine bulletin board. The sanctuaries don't ape one faith, they're a spiritual smoothie blender, mixing human history's holiest hits without going full heretic. Then, there's their DIY lingo, Lingua Cosmica, not the snappiest name, but it's a script of hundreds of glyphs for vibes Latin can't handle. You'll see these symbols carved in stone, gleaming in gold leaf, or etched in marble, hovering over doorways like holy emojis. Giovanni swore they weren't made up but downloaded from angelic group chats like divine DMs from the cosmos. Visitors lose it down. Their tears goosebumps or a weird, "I've been here before" vibe. That's the whole gig. The sanctuaries don't lecture, they vibe. For Terra Mystica, truth isn't a textbook, it's a spark you catch through stories, symbols, and the quiet bits between prayers. Long before steam trains tooted across continents or sailors hollered, New World baby medieval merchants were already hitting the road or well the river. They zigzagged along waterways, trekked frozen steps, and jotted their get-rich-quick schemes on parchment or leather ledgers like medieval Shark Tank hopefuls. Trade wasn't just for kicks, it was about not starving stacking coins and eventually flexing a legacy that screamed, "I was here." Early traders weren't Indiana Jones types. They were blacksmiths, farmers, fur trappers, and salt diggers. But soon, commerce went from gotta eat to gotta strategize, becoming the espresso shot that fueled baby nations. The first trade maps, no fancy globes or GPS. Think doodles scratched on monastery walls, notches on sticks, or mental post-its handed down through guild gossip. Around 1150, C.E. Novgorod's merchants scribbled a trade map on birch bark, not a world atlas, just their favorite river system dotted with trading posts, portages, and cozy winter camps. To them, the world was a watery web with Novgorod as the VIP hub. It wasn't Google Maps, but it screamed one thing loud and clear: cha-ching. These folks were obsessed with markets mastering river routes, seasonal shifts, and where to snag the best beaver pelts or catch a lucky breeze. No roads, no coins, no problem. Just follow the river track, the North Star, and pray your apprentice has a better memory than you. Baltic traders were basically wind whisperers navigating by currents and constellations like medieval meteorologists. Meanwhile, Byzantine merchants cruised the Dnieper and Volga, turning seasonal fairs into Walmart superhighways. Trade wasn't a solo gig, it was a group project timed to the seasons and riskier than a barrel of eels. Bandits, storms, plagues, or just getting lost in Narnia-level forests could end you. But traders hauled goods, slang ideas, and gadgets across regions, stitching together medieval Europe's economy like a quilt made of ambition. You didn't need to sail to Timbuktu to change the game. Sometimes, just reaching the next town monastery or snooty prince's court was enough to spark the web of medieval bling. So medieval trade wasn't just about epic quests. It was the itch to peek past the next forest and leave a trail of prophet-shaped footprints in the unknown. The Byzantine Empire wasn't big on rogue road trippers, but when they traded, they rolled out with pomp paperwork and a squad of armed babysitters. The Dnieper River was their Autobahn, and it wasn't for sunset cruises. Emperors sent trade fleets north to the Rus west to the Danube, and even to the foggy fur-filled wonderland of Scythia, aka the land of furs, which could have been Poland Muscovy, or just that wild steppe where GPS cries. Nobody's sure, but Byzantines loaded their boats with silken prayers, hoping to score amber furs, exotic slaves, and a divine high five for their hustle. One legendary trip went down under Emperor John II Komnenos around 1140 CE, hyped up in the imperial chronicles like a medieval travel vlog. Picture giant river barges, dudes lugging sable pelts, and locals with funky rituals and wooden temples that screamed pagan chic. This wasn't just swapping goods. It was diplomacy, propaganda, and a spiritual flex all in one. Byzantines also hit the Crimea for salt and grain, rolling deep with traders, scribes, soldiers, and priests like a medieval Coachella entourage. These weren't lone wolf missions. Emperors unleashed commercial juggernauts with officials logging every detail: what got traded, who showed up, and how many candles got lit to bribe the gods for fat profits. Constantinople was the empire's beating heart, but it wasn't a hermit. Caravans trudged through Anatolia, linking trading posts and hauling goodies from Persia and India. River trips were dicey, but they kept Kiev, Novgorod, and northern ports in the loop. Trade was no picnic, slow, pricey, and riskier than a barrel of Byzantine fireworks. Still, it was the empire's flex. Every successful deal screamed, Constantinople's the center of the universe, and y'all are just here to trade bow or get baptized. For Byzantines, commerce wasn't flipping the bird. At God, it was their holy side hustle-proof. Their empire was divinely ordained to rule the market. While Byzantium was busy gazing at its own golden mosaics and chanting hymns, the Hanseatic League was out here eyeballing the Baltic Sea like it was a giant dollar sign. Kicking off around 1200 CE in scrappy trading towns like Lübeck, Hamburg, and Bremen, future Germany's cool kids. These merchants didn't bother with swords or crowns. They conquered markets, and boy did they slay. No empire vibes, no massive armies, no fancy cathedrals, just a trade network so slick it made medieval Europe's jaw drop. The Hanseatic League spun a web of routes across the Baltic and North Seas, from Germany's coast to Scandinavia, Novgorod, to London, Bergen, to Bruges. They set up trading posts with their Bergen contour, flexing so hard it could have outshined a king's court. Their secret sauce ship's baby. Hanseatic cogs were the Ferraris of the 1200s, sleek, tough, and ready to surf northern waves with sails oars, and high sides to fend off pirates. These weren't just boats. They were floating Walmarts stuffed with timber furs, amber-salted fish, and a side of business savvy carved into wooden ledgers like medieval Excel sheets. Oh, and they dropped a game changer, standardized weights, measures, and coins. No more haggling over is your pound my pound. They streamlined trade like medieval accountants on a mission, paving the way for English, French, and eventually global standards. But sailing wasn't all smooth seas. Pirates lurked like medieval pop-up ads. Storms could yeet your ship into kindling, and new ports meant dodging shady locals or snooty Italian and Byzantine traders. Still, the Hansa kept at it not as invaders, but as the ultimate hype men hauling Scandinavian timber, Russian furs, Baltic amber, and Polish grain. Some chronicles even whisper they sailed to Iceland and Greenland in the 13th century under English flags. Wild, maybe, but if anyone could have pulled that stunt, it was these sea dogs. They didn't build statues, they built routes mapping medieval Europe with wind waves and straight-up hustle. Meanwhile, way down southeast, a dustier, sweatier saga was unfolding. Forget ships, medieval Eurasia's trade game was all about caravans schlepping across steppes, squeezing through mountain passes, and surviving terrain so brutal it could make a camel quit. This was the Amber Route's golden era, a sprawling overland network linking northern Europe to Byzantium, Central Asia, and the Islamic world. It kicked off around 1000 CE when Slavic princes started sending envoys south to ink deals and swap swag. Enter Ivan the Merchant, who botched his diplomatic gig, but stumbled into civilizations like a medieval gap-year backpacker. He rolled back years later with tales of Byzantine bling, Islamic spices, and cultures so wild the princes forgot to fire him. Trade exploded. Slavic merchants shipped out amber furs, honey wax, and slaves so hot they were the Birkin bags of Kiev to Constantinople. In return, silk, spices, wine, and shiny metals. But it wasn't just stuff swapping hands ideas, tech and religions hitched rides too. Christianity crept deeper into Eastern Europe, Islamic math trickled north, art styles got cozy, and the Cyrillic script spread like medieval Wi-Fi, revolutionizing Slavic scribbles. But the Amber Route was no picnic. Caravans slogged through the Pripyat marshes, aka Horse Graveyard, dodged bandits popping out of forests like bad plot twists, and braved 1,000-mile treks that could take years. Trading posts like Smolensk, Kiev, and Chernigov sparkled like oases, mini-towns where nobody owned the whole route, just taxed it like medieval toll booths. Yet it worked, pumping life, faith, and big dreams across continents like a cosmic Red Bull. While forests and swamps gave traders migraines, the Byzantine Empire was out here paving roads like the OGs of infrastructure. These weren't just paths for armies or goods, they were the empire's Wi-Fi cables, linking a messy quilt of lands, languages, and cultures into one shiny commercial machine. At the core of Byzantium's road game was the Via Ponticia greenlit by Emperor Alexios I Komnenos in the late 11th century. This 800-mile beast of a highway stretched from Constantinople through Anatolia to Trebizond on the Black Sea, linking the empire's east and west like a medieval superhighway. With relay stations stocked with fresh horses and snacks, imperial messengers could zip the whole route in 12 to 15 days, Usain Bolt-level speed for the era. Your average merchant caravan they'd be schlepping for 2 months, probably arguing over who forgot the map. But the Via Pontica wasn't just fast, it was Fort Knox secure. Patrols, forts, and pit-stop way stations kept travelers safe under the Empire's blinged-out banner. Armenian rug hustlers, Italian silk dealers, and gossiping diplomats used it to haul goods, swap hot takes, and stir political tea. It was Byzantium's Amazon Prime for commerce and drama. The Empire's road network didn't stop there spiderwebbing to cities like Nicaea, Ankara, and Sinope, and reaching toward the Caucasus, Syria, and the Balkans. Caravanserais fancy medieval motels dished out beds and supplies for road-weary traders, later becoming VIP spots for Islamic and Ottoman commerce. These roads weren't just pavement. They were Byzantium's flex, gluing its patchwork of peoples into one big, shiny trade machine with standardized coins weights and Greek as the official group chat language. In a world of slow, messy travel, Byzantium served up order structure and a VIP pass to long-distance deal-making. They didn't just rule, they engineered an empire. Medieval Europe's merchants weren't out here building castles or waving swords, at least not at first. They were scrappy hustlers, the OG road trippers from Ibn Battuta to Marco Polo, who showed up fashionably late. These globetrotters chased knowledge deals and straight-up cash not always to conquer, but to snoop, swap, and map the profitable unknown. Take Ahmad ibn Fadlan from Baghdad, who in 922 CE yeeted himself up the Volga River into the land of the midnight sun, possibly Scandinavia or the Arctic's edge. He scribbled tales of endless summer daylight and tree-worshipping locals that had Middle Eastern readers side-eyeing like bro you high. But Ahmad wasn't spinning yarns, he was a diplomat with a merchant's knack for tea-spilling details. Meanwhile, in the western Med-Andalusian traders and brainiacs crisscrossed North Africa, Byzantium, and France. The Crusades of the 11th and 12th centuries cracked the world open like a piñata-spawning trade networks where Arabic was the cool kids' lingua franca from Cordoba to Antioch. Venice, Genoa, and Pisa turned into medieval Walmarts for goods and gossip. Trade wasn't a side hustle anymore, it was the main gig. Then the Italian city-states, especially Venice, rolled in like commerce superheroes. Their maritime empire linked Mediterranean ports, the Black Sea, and even the Indian Ocean with over 3,000 ships and a bank account that could make a dragon blush. Roads like the Via Francigena built for pilgrims doubled as merchant highways, fueling commerce medieval ATMs, and even bougie Euro trips to Byzantine churches, Islamic libraries, and German spa towns. Travel guides became medieval bestsellers. Travel wasn't just practical, it was goals. A trade route to your city meant you were on the map, and every mile of commerce shrank the world. While land routes like the Amber Route dragged caravans through forests and cliffs, another medieval network was splashing across the Baltic and North Seas. These maritime highways linked ports from Novgorod to London, Bergen to Bruges, turning the northern waters into a medieval Etsy marketplace. Long before Columbus fumbled his way to fame, sailors were riding seasonal winds, crossing epic distances, and making bank. The trick timing trips with predictable weather patterns that flipped like clockwork westbound Baltic breezes, in spring eastbound in autumn. With that hack, ships could surf the open sea, turning no-way voyages into no-prob. Hanseatic merchants sailed out of Lübeck and Bremen like medieval delivery drivers hauling timber, amber furs, and grain. In return, they snagged English wool Flemish cloth so fancy it probably had its own fan club, French wine that made monks forget their vows, and spices from the east that screamed, "I'm worth more than your house." Scandinavian traders from Bergen and Stockholm rolled up with dried fish tar and iron ore, basically the Viking equivalent of a hardware store. English merchants from London and York tossed in wool tin and silver, while Flemish ships from Bruges flaunted textiles that could make a king jealous. By the 13th century, Italian ships were gate-crashing northern ports like London and Hamburg, skipping dusty land routes for the VIP sea lane. A sailor's guidebook, the Liber de Navigazione Baltica, was like medieval Yelp dishing on hot trade ports what to swap and how not to crash your cog. This wasn't guesswork, it was the playbook for medieval global flexing. But the sea wasn't just a FedEx route, it was a Wi-Fi signal for ideas. Gothic cathedral blueprints hitchhiked from France to England and Scandinavia on trade ships spreading pointy arches like medieval memes. Unlike land empires with their sword-first talk later. Vibe the Baltic trade network was all about high fives and win-wins. Ports turned into cultural smoothie blenders, mixing German merchants, Danish sailors, Flemish weavers, and English wool dealers in one big harbor party. In this salty medieval soup tides didn't just carry ships, they carried Europe's glow-up. Not every medieval road trip was about cash swords or power grabs. For millions, faith was the ultimate GPS dragging pilgrims across continents to sacred shrines, relic-packed cathedrals, and holy hotspots, all for a shot at healing salvation or divine brownie points. These weren't spiritual staycations, they were hardcore devotion marathons. Pilgrims trekked to dunk in holy wells, hit up shrines like Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela, or scaled mountains to vibe with hermit saints who probably just wanted to be left alone. These grueling trips were thought to scrub sins and fast-track you to God's VIP list. Franciscan and Dominican friars didn't just stick to Europe, they preached their way into Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and even Central Asia, turning trade routes into Jesus fan clubs. In Byzantium, pilgrims swarmed Constantinople to gawk at the crown of thorns and other blinged-out relics in the emperor's crib. Others hit Mount Athos's healing monasteries, tossing offerings and chanting for miracle cures like medieval WebMD. These holy halls weren't just spiritual, they were block parties with vendors, hawking snacks, jugglers stealing the show, and civic parades making it a whole vibe. In the Holy Roman Empire, pilgrimage was a flex of faith and politics trips to Rome, or Jerusalem screamed, "I'm Team Christendom devotees," flocked to Cologne for the Three Kings relics, or Aachen to high-five Charlemagne's tomb, especially during Easter blowouts. In Islamic Iberia and the Eastern Med-Spanish Muslims jetted to Mecca, while Crusades-era Christian pilgrims dodged swords to reach the Holy Land. These sacred treks blurred the line between church and bazaar. Roads were paved for pilgrims, not just armies or merchants. Hostels popped up like medieval Airbnbs, and monasteries moonlighted as motels. Pilgrimage stitched regions together with shared vibes and holy road trips. Sure, your feet moved, but your soul was on a cosmic Uber ride, ditching sins and baggage for a transformed you. By the time the Renaissance rolled in, Europe's connective tissue was already knit not by emperors throwing tantrums, but by merchants, pilgrims, explorers, and nerds who braved the wild unknown. They wove a web of roots, land, sea sacred, and shady swapping goods, ideas, faiths, and gadgets that shaped nations for ages. Trade was the ultimate game changer. Accounting tricks spread like wildfire, standardizing deals across borders. Franciscan and Dominican roadshows owed their clout to wandering friars and faithful fans. Baltic amber sparkled on Byzantine nobles, Flemish cloth kept German princes toasty. English wool fueled Italian looms, and French silver bankrolled crusades. Travel didn't just get medieval folks from point A to point B, it blew their minds wide open. Geographer nerds like Gerald of Wales were out there playing math games with city distances, nailing measurements with nothing but travel times, and some serious brain flexing like medieval MapQuest wizards. Even their wonky maps were baby steps toward a big dream, a Europe where far-off folks weren't dragon-riding myths, but fellow Christians, just stuck on different Wi-Fi networks. Those muddy roads, choppy rivers, and salty sea lanes laid the tracks for the Renaissance's trade empire, turning medieval hustle into the OG global network, the Amber Route. It hooked up with Italian bankers like a medieval power couple. Hanseatic sea routes got passed down to Dutch and English merchants like a family recipe for profit. Baltic sailing know-how, snagged by Portuguese and Spanish explorers who probably muttered, "Thanks Hansa, we'll take it from here." But the real tea, that medieval itch to yeet into the unknown, still vibes hard today. Sure, we've got jets and GPS, but deep down we're channeling the same "what's out there" energy that sent Hanseatic sailors, Slavic caravanners, and Byzantine diplomats packing centuries ago. They didn't have passports, Amex cards, or cancel for any reason insurance. What they had was guts, faith, and a rock-solid hunch that the world past the spooky forest, gnarly mountains, or rogue waves was worth the gamble. That the horizon was calling, and they'd be darned if they didn't answer. Because they rolled those dice, we got a Europe stitched together, not just by kings throwing tantrums or armies flexing, but by people hitting the road, chasing dreams, and leaving a trail of epic stories. All right, history nerds and midnight mystery munchers. Tonight, we're not poking at medieval menus or dusty tomes, we're plunging into the Adriatic Sea where Venetian pearl divers tripped over tech so wild it feels like aliens gatecrashed the 13th century. Off the Dalmatian coast, hidden in a shipwreck's soggy ruins, lies a bronze brainbuster that's had scholars scratching their heads for ages. It's a riddle, wrapped in rusty gears so fancy that when it was first found, folks thought it was a prank pulled by some medieval TikToker. Meet the Mechanicum Mysticum, a clockwork wizard that could predict eclipses, stalk planets, and nail the dates for Easter feasts. Found in a 13th century Venetian trade ship, this gizmo was light years ahead of its time, not popping up again until Renaissance clockmakers got their act together. But here's the kicker that keeps historians chugging coffee at 2 a.m. If medieval gearheads could whip up this, what other mind-blowing gadgets got yeeted into history's recycling bin? Before we scuba dive into this aquatic enigma, smash that like button, subscribe. If you're digging these time-warp tales, and drop a comment with your city and time. I want to know who's up at 3 a.m. slurping instant ramen and geeking out over lost tech like a monk with a caffeine problem. Now dim the lights, light some candles for that scriptorium glow, and let's cannonball into history's weirdest puzzle. It's 1321 and the waters off Korčula are basically the VIP lounge for pearl divers, serving up shiny treasures for Byzantine emperors' bling and Western kings' crowns. Enter Marco Pescatore, a young diver who's about to yeet his name into history books. On a crisp autumn morning, Marco's doing his thing, dipping into the blue-green depths, scanning for oyster glitter, stuffing his net and bobbing up for air. But this time something shiny but not pearly catches his eye. Half buried in the seabed is a shipwreck, its hull munched by time and sea critters, leaving behind bronze bits, broken pots, and plot twist, a funky metal lump the size of a chunky novel scribbled with what looks like alien graffiti. Most divers would have shrugged and kept pearl hunting, but Marco's got the curiosity of a medieval Scooby-Doo. He hauls this weird bronze blob to the surface, along with some wreck swag, and while the pearls get snapped up by merchants faster than Black Friday deals, the mystery lump gathers dust in Marco's workshop for months. Enter his nephew Giovanni, a University of Bologna brainiac, who's basically the family's nerd-in-chief. One day Giovanni takes a peek and goes, "Uncle, you've hit the jackpot." As he chips away, the crusty sea gunk Bambronze gears start winking back, not clunky wagon wheels, but precision cogs with teeth so fine they could have been crafted by a time-traveling Swiss watchmaker. Problem is, this is way before Europe's clockmaking game got serious. The find sends Venice's eggheads into a tizzy. Here's a gadget older than any clock, but fancier than anything in 1321 Europe. Word hits Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, the era's ultimate nerd patron, who yeets a scholar squad to check out what's soon dubbed The Mechanicum Mysticum. The Mechanicum Mysticum didn't pop out of the sea like a shiny new iPhone. Marco dragged up a corroded, barnacle-crusted mess that spilled its secrets slower than a monk copying a Bible. Venetian craftsman babysat by Padua's brain, Trust got to work with the patience of saints, peeling back the gunk, to reveal a gear-packed wonder. This wasn't some wind-up toy for a Duke's kid. It was a bronze supercomputer with over 40 gears all synced up like a cosmic dance party. The biggest gear, palm-sized and sassy, had Latin inscriptions circling it, like a medieval to-do list, months, seasons, and holy days. Smaller gears rocked symbols for the sun-moon planets and constellations like a celestial cheat sheet. Brother Thomas Aquinatus, a Franciscan scholar who spent 3 years geeking out over it, called it a bronze brain, thinking starry thoughts and chatting in sky speak. His Vatican library doodles show a gadget so intricate it makes your head spin. The front had dials and pointers galore. The big one tracked the sun's yearly joyride, while mini dials followed the moon's phases and the 5 planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, like medieval paparazzi. The Mechanicum Mysticum wasn't just a shiny toy, it was a cosmic crystal ball that could predict eclipses like a medieval fortune teller with a PH stud. A sneaky back dial tracked the Saros cycle, that 18-year cosmic rerun of solar and lunar eclipses, using math so fancy it supposedly didn't exist in medieval Europe. When scholars tried to reverse engineer this bronze brainiac, they nearly fell off their stools. The gear ratios were based on stargazing, so spot on, it was spooky. The lunar month pegged at 29,536 days off, by mere minutes from modern clocks. The solar year, 365.247 days, missing the mark by just 6 minutes. That's not just clever, it's did aliens drop this level precision, demanding centuries of obsessive sky watching that according to history books wasn't happening in medieval Europe. Cardinal Farnese, in a letter to Pope John XXIII, was basically freaking out, yo holy boss. This gizmo's rewriting history. It's like some ancient nerds hid a supercomputer in the sea, and it just popped up like Lazarus with a tan. The Mechanicum. Mysticum wasn't just a tech flex, it was a riddle wrapped in a what the heck that demanded answers. Who built this thing? Where'd they get the smarts? And most importantly, what happened to the brain trust that cooked up such a wild gadget? As buzz about the Mechanicum Mysticum spread beyond Venice, Europe's eggheads started tossing out theories like medieval Reddit threads. The device was found on a Venetian ship thanks to the wreck's other goodies, but that didn't mean Venice was cranking out cosmic calculators. Medieval trade was a global garage sale. Venetian ships hauled loot from Constantinople, Alexandria, Damascus, and even farther-flung spots. This gadget could have come from anywhere, like Islamic Spain's scholar dens or Byzantium's monk-packed monasteries. The Chartres brainiacs threw out a hot take, maybe Islamic astronomers built it. The math was giving big Cordoba and Baghdad energy, where scholars had been remixing Greek star charts into next-level gear, like astrolabes and celestial globes. Brother Raymond of Toledo, who'd translated enough Arabic texts to dream in squiggly script, geeked out that lunar math pure. Islamic stargazing swagger polished to a shine I've never seen, but not everyone was sold. The Latin scribbles on the gears hinted at a Christian vibe, and some calculations seemed tuned for northern Italy's latitude, not some Middle Eastern or Spanish starry sky. Then, the German monks led by brainy Albertus Magnus pitched their own theory. Maybe it was a Christian masterpiece, whipped up in a cathedral school or one of those newfangled universities. The University of Paris, medieval Europe's nerd HQ, sent their A-team, including Master Jean de Sacrobosco, the guy who wrote the ultimate guide to spheres. After months of poking the device, Jean was shook. We're staring at something smarter than us, Christian, Islamic, or beamed from Mars. This thing's light years ahead. It's like angels dropped their homework, and we're just now finding it. The real gut punch for these scholars, the idea that knowledge could vanish. They thought the Greeks and early Christians were the goats, and their job was to claw back to that peak. But here was proof that some medieval gearheads had already lapped the ancients' building tech that made Aristotle look like he was using a sundial. The mystery got spicier when they tried to date the thing. The bronze was crusted like it'd been chilling underwater for decades, maybe centuries, but the gear cutting was so slick it screamed future tech for anything pre-1300s. Carbon dating was 6 centuries away, so scholars played detective with style clues and shipwreck vibes. The vessel was Venetian per its build, and nearby loot and records showed plenty of ships getting yeeted by storms off the Dalmatian coast. A juicy lead popped up in the Doge's palace archives like a medieval Easter egg. In 1278, a Venetian merchant named Lorenzo Navigatore splashed some serious cash on what records called a super-duper gadget for tracking holy days and star shenanigans. The mastermind behind it, a shadowy craftsman dubbed Claudius Astronomus, who breezed into Venetian paperwork like a cosmic cameo before ghosting everyone. Lorenzo's ship, the Santa Maria Celestialis, got yeeted by a storm en route from Constantinople in 1279 crew and all presumed fish food. Could the Mechanicum Mysticum be Lorenzo's lost bling chilling underwater for over 40 years, until Marco Pescatore's lucky dive? The dates lined up and the device's fancy vibes screamed bespoke masterpiece, not some medieval IKEA kit. But this just kicked the can down the road. Who the heck was Claudius, and where'd he snag the smarts to build this star tickler? Chasing Claudius was like hunting a medieval Pokemon. Scholars scoured Venice's guild ledgers to far-flung monastery scrolls, but the guy was slippery. They nabbed a crumb in 1275. The Venetian Glassmakers Guild listed Claudius as a consultant for star math, which was odd, like hiring an astrophysicist to blow vases. He wasn't a card-carrying craftsman, but a knowledge ninja hopping, trades like a Renaissance freelancer. Brother Antonio of Cordoba, dishing in his medieval who's who, spilled about meeting Claudius at a 1276 nerd convention. Dude was quiet. Antonio scribbled, but when he dropped knowledge, it was like the room got a PhD. He bragged about studying in Constantinople, Alexandria, and some sketchy spots I'm too monk to name drop. That strange places bit had modern researchers raising eyebrows like medieval gossip queens. Scholars back then loved flexing their study abroad creds. Why the vague booking? One theory pointed to Byzantium's brainy renaissance under the Paleologus crew, who in the late 1200s opened nerd academies that pulled scholars from everywhere, maybe even lost monk lore stashes. Byzantine geeks had Greek scrolls the West forgot packed with mathy star charts, and they swapped notes with Islamic brainiacs despite the Crusades drama. Could Claudius have been a grad student in this Byzantine nerdtopia? Another spicy clue came from the Fourth Crusade's 1204 dumpster fire, when Constantinople got looted harder than a Black Friday sale. Manuscripts and artifacts got scattered, some hit Western libraries, others vanished into shady noble basements or Venice's flea markets. Rumors swirled about automata Byzantine crafted gizmos that sounded like sci-fi. Most were brushed off as tavern tales, but the Mechanicum Mysticum was like, hold my mead, legends are real. Claudius's last cameo was in late 1278 when a Venetian notary logged a payment to Magister Claudius for finishing Lorenzo's celestial doodad. Then, poof, nothing. No obituary, no guild memos, no scholarly fan mail. It's like Claudius yeeted himself into the void, clutching his secrets like a medieval Z-07. Poking at the Mechanicum Mysticum was like dissecting a bronze alien brain, Brother Thomas Equinatus. And his scholar squad found a gadget so slick it was basically a medieval MacBook. Every gear and dial screamed genius-crunching star math with precision that made monks sweat. Its main gig nailing the church's Easter date, a headache that had priests pulling their hair out over solar and lunar cycles. Easter math was a nightmare, but the Mechanicum Mysticum was like chill. I got this spitting out dates like a holy spreadsheet. The Mechanicum. Mysticum wasn't just a glorified desk calendar, it was a cosmic multi-tool that could track planetary orbits, predict eclipse drama, and even calculate the precession of the equinoxes. A star-shifting trick European stargazers wouldn't grope for another 100 years. Most bonkers. Of all, it rocked a mechanical differential gear, a tech flex that didn't hit European clocks until the 1500s. This gear wizardry let the device mimic the wonky speeds of planets channeling ancient Greek epicycle vibes, with gears so slick they could have starred in a medieval heist flick. The gear cutting was next level too. Medieval blacksmiths were usually more bash it till it fits, but these cogs had tolerances so tight they wouldn't be matched until Renaissance clock nerds got fancy. Each tooth was polished like it had a date with the stars, keeping the whole contraption purring despite its brain-melting complexity. Cardinal Farnese, geeking out in letters to Bologna's Brain Trust, called it a cosmic classroom. This bad boy doesn't just predict sky shows, it's a bronze TED Talk on how they work. The maker wanted it to school us true enough. The device was a nerd's dream with Latin labels spelling out each part's job like a medieval IKEA manual. Gear ratios came with mathy notes showing off the cosmic equations, like a professor flexing on a chalkboard. Students could watch the universe's dance party planet's moon, and all unfold. In real time, a hands-on cosmic crash course in an era when most learning was just read this scroll and pray. But the real head-scratcher, the Mechanicum Mysticum, hinted at medieval know-how that shouldn't exist. Its star math was so on point, it was like someone hacked the sky. The lunar month nailed at 29.530588 days, off by seconds from modern stats. The solar year, 365.246 days, missing by less than a coffee break. That kind of accuracy needed hardcore math and centuries of sky staring, but 13th century Europe was supposedly still squinting at sundials. Had some rogue astronomer outdone Tycho Brahe 3 centuries early? Or was this gizmo cribbing from ancient cheat sheets smuggled through time? Brother Thomas, wrapping his final report, was shook. This thing's smarter than us. Ancient scrolls, Islamic brainiacs, divine group chat. No clue. All I know is it makes us look like cosmic kindergartners. The Mechanicum. Mysticum wasn't just a gadget, it was a sassy reminder that medieval nerds might have been brighter than anyone thought, shining a light that never fully dimmed in the so-called Dark Ages. Word of this bronze brain spread faster than medieval gossip, hyping up nobles, merchants, and even peasants across Europe. By 1325, just 4 years, post-discovery chronicles from England to Hungary were raving about the miracle math machine. Pope John XXXIII, who'd initially side-eyed the hype, summoned Cardinal Farnese to Avignon to show off the goods. The papal court, used to fancy relics and scholar flexes, reportedly lost their meters when the device spun its magic. Legend says the Pope challenged it to predict Avignon's next solar eclipse. The Mechanicum Mysticum spat out May 14th, 1333, kicking off at 9 a.m. sharp. When that day rolled around, the sky went dark right on cue, and folks swore the device was either holy or straight-up wizardry. The Avignon demo was a game-changer. Pope John XXXIII ordered knockoffs for every big cathedral, but medieval craftsmen were like brew, we can't even. The few attempts were clunky, barely able to count Sundays, let alone eclipses. King Edward III of England sent his stargazer master William of Ockham to Venice for a peek. After 3 months, William came back mumbling, "It's like the ancients left us a cosmic post-it we can't read yet." Holy Roman Emperor Louis IV went all in, throwing buckets of cash at German smiths to clone it. Spoiler, they flopped. Their version was shiny but dumber than a sack of hammers, missing the Mechanicum's starry swagger. The botched attempts to knock off the Mechanicum Mysticum only pumped up its street cred. Here was a gadget you could poke prod and sorta get, but good luck copying it. Medieval craftsmen were out here flopping like a fish on a dock. It was like the device was flexing. Y'all thought you were smart. Think again. This bronze brainiac stood as a sassy reminder that some medieval nerds had skills we'd lost mocking the eras. We're so learned vibes. It also kicked off some spicy theological bar fights. Some church bigwigs saw it as God's PowerPoint, claiming divine inspiration had gifted some brainy chosen ones with future tech know-how. Others clutched their rosaries, whispering it reeked of devil juice too accurate to be holy, too clever to be chill. These debates were less about gears and more about the eternal medieval tug-of-war faith versus brain gods' memos versus nerdy experiments. The Mechanicum Mysticum forced monks to wrestle with the wild idea that humans might figure stuff out without a heavenly post-it note. Brother Roger Bacon, the English friar, who was basically a medieval mythbuster, zipped to Venice to eyeball the gizmo. Writing in a sneaky cipher to dodge church side-eye, he dropped a hot take. This thing proves faith and science can vibe. God's universe runs on rules we can crack, and figuring them out just makes him look cooler. By the 1330s, the Mechanicum Mysticum was a bucket list stop. Scholars, nobles, and nosy tourists flocked to Venice to gawk at the miracle math box. The Venetian government, smelling a tourism goldmine, parked it in a swanky Doge's palace room where visitors could watch it tick under hawk-eyed guards like a medieval museum heist waiting to happen. The device wasn't just a shiny toy, it lit a fire under craftsmen and scholars to dream big. The epic astronomical clocks in Strasbourg, Prague, and Wells. They owe a nod to the Mechanicum's starry swagger. Even wilder, it flipped the script on how folks saw history. Instead of thinking they were clawing back to ancient glory, medieval nerds started wondering if knowledge could stack up each generation, high-fiving the last. In the end, the Mechanicum Mysticum is more than a fancy gadget. It's a medieval mic drop, a moment when Europe peaked at its own potential, before it got lost in the historical fog. It's still chilling in Venice, ticking away after 700 years, like a cosmic Fitbit keeping perfect sync with the stars. It's a bronze timekeeper whispering, "You don't know half the stuff we pulled off." For visitors, it's a challenge. What other bonkers inventions are hiding in history's attic, ready to yeet our assumptions about what medieval folks could do? What other Claudius Astronomuses were out there dropping knowledge bombs we're only now catching? Maybe that's the Mechanicum's real gift, not eclipse predictions or feast day math, but its knack for sparking wonder. In a world that thinks progress is a straight line, this gizmo says knowledge is a loopy roller coaster. Wisdom gets lost, found, and lost again, and the past might hold cheat codes for futures we're too busy to dream up. As its gears keep grooving counting time with eerie precision, they're dishing a truth that slaps across centuries. Human genius doesn't care about your calendar, and brilliance, like the sea, comes and goes. In waves, we're just starting to surf. All right, you starry-eyed history buffs. We're not done with the Mechanicum Mysticum yet. This bronze brainiac didn't just tick off eclipses and Easter dates, it flipped medieval Europe's whole vibe like a cosmic DJ dropping a beat nobody was ready for. So grab your metaphorical scuba gear, keep those candles flickering for that monkish ambiance, and let's crank this mystery up to 11. We're diving deeper into what this gadget did to the medieval mind, why it still got us shook, and because I know you're wondering what other wild tech might be chilling in history's lost and found. If you're still vibing, smash that like button, tell me in the comments what time it is, where you are, and let's keep unraveling this 13th century plot twist. By the late 1330s, the Mechanicum Mysticum wasn't just Venice's hottest tourist trap, it was medieval Europe's equivalent of a viral TikTok. Chronicles from Paris to Prague name-dropped this star-whispering machine, and it wasn't just scholars geeking out. Tavern bards spun yarns about it, claiming it could predict your harvest or your love life. Spoiler, it couldn't. Merchants in Bruges swore it was cursed, nuns in Cologne prayed it was blessed. The device was a medieval Rorschach test. Everyone saw what they wanted, from divine Wi-Fi to Satan's pocket watch. And that buzz. It changed how people thought about what humans could pull off. Suddenly, the idea that some random gearhead in a toga could outsmart the ancients wasn't so crazy. The Venetian bigwigs, never ones to miss a coin, turned the Mechanicum Mysticum into a full-on spectacle. By 1340, they'd built a fancy viewing chamber in the Doge's palace, complete with velvet ropes and monks chanting for extra drama. Visitors paid a silver coin to watch the gears spin like a medieval IMAX show. A scholar priest would crank the dials, and bam, the crowd would gasp as the moon dial clicked into a perfect crescent. One chronicler, Brother Matteo of Verona, wrote, "It's like watching God's calendar do a jig." I wept, then bought a souvenir parchment. Yep, they had merch, think medieval museum gift shop, but with more quills. This hype wasn't just about shiny gears. The Mechanicum Mysticum sparked a mini renaissance before the Renaissance was cool. Clockmakers across Europe, inspired by its razzle-dazzle, started tinkering like mad. The massive astronomical clocks in Strasbourg and Prague, they're like the Mechanicum's less gifted cousins, big and flashy, but not quite as brainy. Even alchemists got in on the action, wondering if the device held the secret to turning lead into gold. It didn't, but points for dreaming. The gadget was proof you didn't need a halo to build something heavenly, it just took math grit and maybe a pinch of cosmic chutzpah. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Where'd this thing come from? The Claudius Astronomus trail went colder than a Baltic winter, but that didn't stop medieval sleuths or modern ones from playing detective. Some Venetian scholars swore Claudius was a Byzantine runaway, smuggling Greek scrolls stuffed with star math. Others bet he was an Islamic scholar incognito, dropping Cordoba-level brain bombs in Venice's backyard. A wilder theory, he was a time traveler yeeting 16th century tech into the 1200s. Okay, maybe not, but you gotta admit the guy's ghost act is Seuss. One monk, Father Gregorio of Milan, even suggested Claudius was taught by star beings, which sounds like medieval sci-fi, but got a surprising number of nods at the time. The Mechanicum Mysticum's precision kept fueling the debate. Its lunar and solar calculations were so tight, they made modern astronomers spill their coffee. To hit those numbers, someone had to watch the sky for centuries, but 13th century Europe was too busy dodging plagues and crusades to run a cosmic observatory. So was it ancient Greek data smuggled via Byzantium Islamic star charts from Baghdad's glory days? Or, bear with me, did some secret medieval nerd squad have a telescope stashed in a barn? Brother Thomas Aequinatus, still obsessed, scribbled in his diary, "This device laughs at our ignorance. It knows things we forgot to ask. Deep, Thomas, deep." The device's fame also stirred up some medieval shade. Hardcore church types grumbled it was too clever, like it was showing off God's secrets without a permit. A bishop in Florence preached that only demons count stars so well, but most folks ignored him, eclipses don't lie, and the Mechanicum was batting 1,000. Meanwhile, scholars like Roger Bacon were out here standing, arguing it proved humans could decode God's universe without divine cheat codes. This faith versus reason beef was peak medieval drama, and the Mechanicum Mysticum was the spicy centerpiece daring everyone to rethink what possible meant. By the 1350s, the device was a cultural icon, but its mystery only grew. Attempts to trace its origins kept hitting dead ends. Venetian ship logs showed the Santa Maria Celestialis had stopped in Constantinople, Alexandria, and a sketchy port in Crete before its fatal storm. Was the Mechanicum a Byzantine prototype? An Egyptian relic? A one-off from a genius who got seasick and swore off sailing? Nobody knew, and the lack of answers drove scholars nuts. One German monk, Hans of Freiburg, threw his hands up and wrote, "Maybe it fell from the moon. I'm done. Same hands, same." Fast forward to today, and the Mechanicum Mysticum still sits in Venice, ticking away like it's got nowhere better to be. Housed in a climate-controlled case, it's a rock star at the Museo Carrere, drawing crowds who squint at its gears and whisper, "How?" Modern scans have revealed even more secrets micro-engravings on the gears. Invisible to medieval eyes hinting at math we're still decoding. But the big questions linger: who made it, and what else did they know? The device is a bronze middle finger to the idea that history's a straight line, reminding us that genius can pop up, vanish, and leave us chasing its shadow. So what's the Mechanicum Mysticum's real legacy? It's not just about eclipses or Easter, it's about making us wonder. Every gear asks, what else got lost? What other Claudius-level brainiacs were out there building stuff we can't even dream of? It's a nudge to dig deeper, to question the Dark Ages label, to realize our ancestors might have been smarter than we think. As its cogs keep spinning, syncing with the stars like a cosmic metronome, their shouting human brilliance doesn't play by our rules. It flares, fades, and flares again, waiting for someone curious enough to find it. Thanks for diving into this Adriatic adventure, you absolute legends. Drop a comment. Where are you? What's the time? And what lost medieval tech do you think is still out there? Keep those candles lit. Stay curious. And let's keep chasing history's wildest secrets. Until next time, this is your History Hype Man signing off.